So, Chris, this is the Urban Ministry Show on YouTube.
All right.
I wanna ask you a couple of questions, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You're from America.
That is true.
Tell us about your wife.
I met my wife in uni. We've been married 26 years, and she was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. And so, we met in uni, got involved in urban church there, and that's where God started doing some things, heart for the city. And so after seminary, worked 8 years in urban ministry in Tennessee. And then through a variety of circumstances, felt like God calling us to London. And, in a sort of funny way, we're sort of halfway between her family in Nairobi and my family in the U.S. in St. Louis.
So, a white American from Alabama.
Grew up in Alabama.
For 10
years, yeah.
Marries a girl from Kenya.
Yeah, that's right.
Then comes to Shepherd's Bush.
Yeah, and she was not a missionary kid. She is a black Kenyan African woman.
So we would have her here in the room, but she's not even in this country at the moment.
Just on a quick, yeah.
So you guys came to Shepherd's Bush, which is a very, I know originally you actually came to West London.
And initially in Southall. And so, worked 5 years in Southall, in the South Asian church there.
Okay. So you was in a South Asian church, then you go to Shepherd's Bush, which is a very diverse part of London.
Yeah.
And you planted a church there.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, what was it that you saw that you were like, I want to plant a church here? And what were the things that you thought, I want our church to have these certain values? Like, what was going on in your mind?
Yeah. I think if you look at the London church world, there are good churches, and God is doing things. I don't want to diss anybody, any church. You can go down to central London, big churches are doing things, but I think there is missing a lot of the neighborhood churches that are really preaching the gospel, not only verbally, but also preaching it through the actions and loving people in practical ways. But even those in those neighborhood churches, they're very divided and on ethnic lines. So there may be a good gospel church, but it's pretty much all white, European, English, or some other Afro-Caribbean churches, whatnot, immigrant churches, maybe language issues, that sort of thing. But in our business world, in our educational world, all these people are sort of mixing in a variety of ways. And you don't see a lot of churches that are sort of, okay, how does the gospel speak into our ethnic barriers and the differences that we have in our society? And so Shepherd's Bush felt like a place where you have lots of different people interacting on business level, educational level, but spiritually, not so much. And so how do we bring sort of gospel evangelism, calling people to faith, but also, the holistic, whole renewal that the gospel brings.
I like what you said there. That's quite deep. Where you said that if you look at London neighbourhoods, in terms of in the business world, people are mixing. Different ethnicities, different classes are mixing. You look at the educational world, people are mixing. Again, if you go in your local FE college or your secondary school, you see a real mixture of people. So it shouldn't be the case that in church life, people aren't mixed as much. In fact,
there's some, and I don't act like there's nothing happening. Of course, of course. But that's not the trend. That's not the norm, and it's the same in the States. I don't pretend that we are divided people. And there's historical reasons for that. There are cultural reasons for that. There's a lot of, you can think about that, but in a lot of sense, especially with the immigrant side, when you think about that, when you get to the first generation, you have language barriers, and I know that's a tricky to address. But when you start getting to the second generation, you start, wow, they're all speaking English, and they're all listening to the same music, and they're all sort of in school together. Why are we kind of now, when it's Sunday, we go worship in this way or that way? So trying to think through, those kind of questions.
So what about values? Like, what were the values as you were planting a new church? What were the values that you were hoping that your church family would have?
Well, I think one thing that we're a Christian church. Obviously, we're about what God is doing, getting on board with what His plan, and we are a gospel-centered church. I don't like the idea that, we're New City and Shepherd's Bush, we're a sort of reconciliation church or something like that, that there's some sort of the value of, we got a black person and a white person and an Asian person, and they're friends, and they eat together and they worship together. No. The first thing is about Jesus and what God is doing through the person and work of Jesus in bringing healing, bringing renewal to all areas of life. That is what, and the implications of the gospel then in this neighborhood, like Shepherd's Bush, but also like many neighborhoods in London, that has all these different people there. It means, God is going to bring reconciliation. God's going to bring healing to relationships. And that healing, it may be there was actual conflict, or it could be they're just operating on different levels and they're really not interacting at all. Mm-hmm. But there's going to become deep friendships between people with a Nigerian background and Brazilian background and Iraqi and a Korean and a white American, that God is going to do something to bring some real beauty around the gospel, around who Jesus is, not around some theoretical idea that I want to have a bunch of people who look differently and eat different foods together. That's just it's a consequence of living out the gospel. Not our primary value. When you talk about values, we want to be about very intentional about our love of people in practical kind of ways. So in involving feeding people who are hungry, serving people in very practical kinds of ways. We want to be involved in prayer. This is a spiritual ministry. Even serving people food is a spiritual ministry. Mm-hmm. And as you can have a lot of conflict in the kitchen, and you need the Spirit there. We've been involved in homeless work and that sort of thing. And you can sort of grunt through, but you need the Spirit if you're going to see something. So valuing prayer. These are some of the things. So on some levels, I don't think lots of churches are gospel-centered. But if you're intentional about thinking about ethnicity and about race and about class issues, about poverty issues, in a context like Shepherd's Bush, then you've got to start there's going to be some ways in which your church is going to look different than maybe it looks in other places. Not in a judgmental way, but it's going to look different. If you're serious about the gospel and you're serious about the context that you're in a place like London.
So starting with Jesus first.
Yeah.
So you weren't starting, I think it's quite important, you weren't starting with the idea of we must be a multi-ethnic group. You were starting with we got to be following Jesus first.
Yeah.
That was your primary.
That is fine. Yeah, foundational.
Right? And with that as the core thing, is then the thing of Jesus brings all the different ethnicities and classes together.
Yeah, and
so we want to reflect that.
But there is some intentionality there. As you start making connections and making friendships and discipling people, that there is some intentionality, and so musically. That we might do a song in another language or have a reggae beat to it or something like this that has a different sort of musical feel. I would say from the very beginning, though, we did say that we're an English-speaking church. Right. So the language issue, I can only speak English, and my language skills are pretty poor. I can barely get my English words out. So the idea that I always sort of said, if God brought us 50 Brazilians, then man, we would have to start thinking about how do we translate into Portuguese or something like this. But that's not been the case.
Interestingly, because you mentioned the generation thing earlier, second generation generally want the service in church to be in English as well. And
I think
it was.
Right.
You made that decision about doing stuff in English, which I think was a good call. At the same time, you did lots of stuff where, like, you would even have welcome messages that were in lots of languages, which also, I know I had a friend who turned up from another part of the world who said, that made them feel really welcome.
Yeah.
So you're doing stuff in English, but you're also communicating
little things to say you're welcome here if you struggle with English. I mean, one time I was sitting there, we had a meal together oftentimes, and I've got a Korean man here. His English is he's still trying to learn. There's an Indian man across the table, and I forgot if he was Nigerian or something. And in some levels, yeah, you could say, well, what in the world is a Korean and an Indian and a Nigerian? None of them speak English that well, but they're all sort of in the same place of trying to learn to live in this city of London and trying to grow and learn, and then we're all human beings. Let's talk about life and what does that do? But as a church, in the intentionality, we've tried. Sometimes on our book table, we'll have books in Arabic or other kind of tracts or other kind of literature, so that if people come in and there's a Polish, I have something here. There's a man that I baptized. He spoke Tamil, and I had back in the office a little Gospel of Mark or something in his language, and he had never seen. That was one of the first times I met him, and just a little bit. He could speak English, and we were speaking English. But the fact that I had just a little bit was like, wow, it was sort of a light bulb moment for him.
Something that I want to bring up, because something I really appreciate about your church, is that you got people from different nations there, but it's not all middle class people. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we try to do multi-ethnic church, we end up with just people from different nations, but they're all middle class. So whilst there's diversity, there's also a lot of sameness in terms of class. Whereas I noticed you had a range of people. So was that something that from the get-go you were thinking we want to reach all kinds of people?
I mean, obviously as an American, I bring in my own history and things there. One of my first, when the Lord was working in my heart, was doing an internship with. I'm white middle class, and that's what I grew up in. But I did an internship with poor African American widows, in the urban context, and just hearing these elderly women that are in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, talking about living through the civil rights movement and the struggles that they had been through. That was really, God used that time, and the way they articulated their faith was very different, but they had been through so much, the pain and the suffering that they had experienced. It really made my nice little comfortable faith, where I had nice little Westminster Confession, catechisms, and that was fine, it was good, but man, I didn't have these kind of issues that they had. So God really, and as I read the Bible differently, and God's heart for the poor, for the people who have disadvantaged in different ways because of racism in America or whatever. As I come into this culture, the class issues, I want to be careful in how I comment about the British culture. I know who I am, but there are definitely class issues, and we know that. I mean, I think if you're halfway awake, you see the class, the council estate versus the posh. Sort of Oxford, Cambridge sort of culture. It's different. And so how can we be intentional about welcoming whoever comes and whatever background they come from? I think in the preaching, you have to be thinking about that. You can have concepts that are deep, but you can articulate them and with your illustrations and the way you're explaining things in a way that is very much on the street. You can talk about going to the chip shop down the street and this happened. I'm not sure what that example is, but you go get some fried chicken and you're interacting, and that could be an example that's different from an example that you read in a Puritan that was written 400 years ago. The other thing, I for myself or others that preach, we explain what we're talking about. And I don't just throw out even John Calvin or Martin Luther or whoever names without saying he was a French man who lived hundreds of years ago and was a refugee in Geneva and this kinds of thing. You've got to have little bits of explanation, because you got people who aren't coming with the same sort of background and history and understanding. That's okay. Because there's the class issues too, but also we got people from a Hindu background he doesn't have all that background of the Bible stories. You know, you can't just say, remember Jonah when he was, Jonah the whale, like what? They don't have all that. If people are, so it's okay to say there's an Old Testament prophet and he was running from God. He got just those. It doesn't take much, but it takes them a little bit of intentionality to make people feel like they're not completely outsiders to the Christian language that we use.
That's a great point, because when you're saying it doesn't take much, you're right. Like, some of us would shy away from referring to Old Testament stories thinking people would know it. But like you said, you can just quickly say Jonah was a prophet who ran away from God. Yeah. Boom, job's done.
Yeah.
I like as well that you were saying about mentioning, if you're going to quote Calvin was a Frenchman, however many years ago, because that also means if you've got anyone from France, they feel like, oh, Christianity's for me. And as I know you're well aware of, is so important when we're quoting people like Augustine, that we're actually saying this was an African theologian, so that we're actually communicating that our faith, Christianity, actually was obviously it came from Christ in the Middle East, but it was deeply formed. Theologizing, a lot of it happened in Northern Africa.
Right. Well, and in the Middle East, I mean, we have a guy who's Iraqi, and so when I forgot. Be careful what I say on camera, but just when the biblical story is happening in modern day Iraq, you can say, hey, this is modern day, or Turkey. We've had interaction with Turkish people. Paul went. This church is in Turkey now. It's not that's not the name that we read in the scripture, but that's where this place was. And so trying to bring it to relevant. Out of the biblical world, make that transition from what's on the text to the modern ear, that the labels of Iraq and Turkey and the North Africa, like you said, for Augustine, who's not biblical, but still the biblical story, or being a refugee for Calvin, or running from people who are that just sort of some of the language that we have in a modern context that we don't normally think about in our church fathers or in the biblical text, maybe. Just to help people, I had to, from Somali, I'm running from the thing. Other people have done that in the past.
Which is so important, because the Christian faith in the Old Testament and the New Testament is about people who are at the margins.
Yes.
Whether it's the Hebrew slaves, or if it's the Israelites who are living in Roman occupied Palestine. Right. It's like people at the margins following Jesus. And obviously from Christendom for hundreds of years in the West, Christianity has been presented from a place of power. Right. And it's so important that we're communicating to people. Actually, the gospel is for people at the margins.
On the edge. That is where it has. The gospel has power when people who don't have power understand what God is doing, and that's amazing. I mean, when the light bulbs start going off, when you're like, "Wow, God loves me," even though my situation is not very exciting and can be very depressing and all kind of. But there's the Creator of heaven and earth cares about me and my situation. That's life transforming.
Now let's just talk about your team. Let's first talk about like leadership team. That is a multi-ethnic leadership team, right? And we're kind of time traveling as we're talking, because you've left London, you've gone back to the States. Now you're over London for a few days, and we're kind of the church is still functioning, obviously, but you've left and you're in America. And so I'm kind of talking about before you went back to the States. Sorry, that was a really complicated explanation. But before you did, your leadership team was a multi-ethnic leadership team, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously my wife is black, so that from the very beginning, there's a sense in which we're multi-ethnic, just as a couple. But my intention, my prayer from the very beginning, that it would not just be Americans, but it would not just be white people. And so God has brought along the way, whether it's pastoral assistants. Ung Lee is British Korean. He's Korean, born in Korea, but came when he was 4 or 5 years old, and so very British. in his education, his outlook, and that sort of thing, and it's been very helpful. And then God brought Marcus Gadsden, who is African American, along the way as well. We've had other people for a shorter period of time who've had Vietnamese background or German background or other sort of ethnic backgrounds for a period of whether it's summertime, Hispanic, others, or longer. So you've had Nigerian background, Black British.
So if I sum up
English,
the things that I've seen that have made people feel welcome, I think is one, you've had a multi-ethnic leadership team, right? You've had, like you were just saying just now, in the preaching, making everyone feel welcome in terms of how you preach.
Right.
The other thing is the food. Like you guys would intentionally cook meals from different nations.
Yeah, we do. Not all the time, but there's some. We do a lot of pizza.
Right.
Just normal kind of pastas and things like that. But yeah, we've had Brazilian night where the Brazilian group did barbecue. We had Nigerian night, and people encourage people to make some serve us and serve the community by bringing some different tastes from your background. It's not every week, but it's a way of celebrating people's backgrounds and letting people try different things. Korean, we had obviously Korean food and at different times along the way as well. But I think there's that intentionality.
Yeah.
It comes through in the preaching, it comes through in the worship decisions that are made.
Yep, and the worship style for the music.
Yeah.
I've also seen you guys, like you, Ung and Marcus, you don't just preach at the front, you actually meet up with people one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like walking with people in their spiritual walk.
Yeah, we want to be it's not just let's have a 1 or 2 hour service and then we'll see you in a week from now. That really is, it is a life together. And that looks different for different people, different times, but in theory, you could be meeting with somebody for worship on Sunday, or maybe even they're helping to set up or cook for the meal afterwards. But then we're meeting, we do help with a homeless dinner on Monday, so maybe they're helping to come serve on that. We have Bible studies for men and women on Wednesdays, so you can see somebody there. We're doing some intentional outreach and evangelism on Fridays. We might have, occasionally we'll do other kind of fun kind of things on Saturdays. So there's a sense in which if London is a reputation of a lonely place, as a lonely London, you could be with us Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, in this sort of the community that we sought to create in Shepherd's Bush. Obviously, that's not every week, and some people we only see them on Sundays, or we may only see them on Mondays if they're spiritually at different places. And then one-on-ones, coffees, and meeting up with people, seeing people on the street, that sort of thing.
Now, there's one final sort of ingredient we haven't talked about, but I think is big, which is grace-based.
Yeah.
In the Surge world, right, in a World Harvest UK or Surge US, in the movement that Jack Miller started years ago, when we say grace-based, I think in terms of the practicalities, we are maybe emphasizing it a bit more in certain practical ways than some of the church backgrounds we've come from in the past. So I guess in terms of grace-based, when we're talking about like working with people, what does that mean in terms of if someone keeps messing up when you're working with them?
Right.
What does that mean to be grace-based?
On one thing is that we ought to, as leaders, we need to be the first repenters.
Right.
And so people need to see us not as, hey, I'm the pastor, I've got my life together, you better try to be like me. And okay, I made a few mistakes in my life, but generally Jesus has forgiven me. No, I continue to struggle. And people, obviously there's you have to be careful on how much you pour out your soul in front of the congregation or something like that. But people need to know you're a regular human being, and there's an ongoing sort of battle with the flesh, and the spirit is an ongoing work in your life. And so I'm not embarrassed to share my own struggles and my growth with people in an appropriate way.
And I think sometimes we might share our struggles in a way that isn't actually repentance. Like when you were saying we should be the chief repenters.
Right.
Like we should be repenting more than people we're leading. And I think there's sometimes a way that we share our struggles where it's not really repentance.
Well, yeah, I guess I was thinking in a teaching context,
Right.
in a life context, whether it's a team or the church as a whole. Yeah, people ought to be. Yeah, Chris came to them and privately or in a context. I mean, I wouldn't be in a preaching or a teaching capacity repenting from normally, but behind the scenes, when I hope people would can think of times when I've come to people and said, hey, I think I was harsh with you when I told you last Sunday about doing this or that, or I think maybe I misspoke, or I didn't give you the benefit of the doubt, or whatever. When I'm going into relationships, I'm first saying, okay, what did I do wrong here? How did I make it? Even if the other person's blown it. And that's what I was going to say too, in grace-based, is that I'm not surprised by anybody's sin. We should not be, whether it's people on the street and that somebody comes in, oh, you smoke marijuana, I can't believe this. No, there's people do all kind of stuff, and not that I want to make that all the sort of the bad things people have done in their lives normalized, but I also shouldn't be surprised that sinners sin, and that there's mercy, there's grace, there's healing for whatever sins, both that they have done and have been done to them.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. So lastly, Chris, as an American coming into London, if someone asked you, if a Brit asked you, what are some key things that you think Christians in London need to think through, things that we need to think through, issues, what would you say that they are? And I'm not saying that necessarily issues that people aren't already thinking through, but the things that you think people need to still keep thinking through, because we need to develop further how we deal with certain things.
Well, obviously the ethnicity issues that you cannot, I've been riding public transport the last couple of days, you cannot go around London and think that you live in a bubble of your own little world. I mean, that's just impossible. Because of the historical reality of the British Empire and what has happened, what's going on here, I think the church has to think through in a way that's deep and it's different than the way the media, the politicians, and whatnot are thinking about what do we do with all the diversity that we see in London, especially in the UK as a whole, but in London specifically. And some of that is going to be similar. Some of the language may be similar to what the world is sort of talking about, but sometimes it's going to be very different, and that's okay. And we need to be able to process that, help our people think through that. I think, and then obviously we talked about some of the class issues as well, and it's an ongoing where you have London, where you have the really, really rich, and you have some really, really poor, and there's it's not too hard to scratch below the surface of all the beauty and the glitz in London and see sort of the underworld that's going on here. And I think the church has got to sort of think about that, and how are we addressing the injustice that we see in our city? How do we address the real poverty, the real brokenness, the addictions, the homelessness, these other things that are societal issues in our society? Is aware of the loneliness. London's a lonely city. People do not have friends. They do not have family. They come into the city in some levels maybe to get away. And how is the church going to speak about those things, but then how are they going to act to address? You can't do everything, of course, and sometimes it's just a small little drop in the ocean, I should say, of God's work. But that's all right. It's a mustard seed. You're just a little bit, I'm one little man, we're one little church, trying to, a little tiny oasis of God's work, God's grace, that He's doing there.
So you said ethnicity, you said class, you said loneliness.
Yeah.
If you hadn't mentioned the loneliness one, I'd say it was almost an advert for the urban ministry program module I'm working on for ethnicity and class. But yeah, lastly, is your PhD that you're working on going to help us in London?
I hope so.
Yeah. What's the title?
I am doing intercultural studies at TEDS, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and I'm looking at multi-ethnic church in the Western world. So dealing with issues of ethnicity, race, but also immigration, and I'm still a ways to go as I work towards my sort of dissertation questions. I'm not there yet. The American system is a little different. I had a couple years of coursework before I've gotten to the dissertation phase. So I'm almost finished with the coursework. And I hope so. I hope it will be, I am a practitioner first and then a academic second. And so I would hopefully, as I think about how does the church respond to the changing dynamic of what our cities look like in America and in Europe. That's what I'm concerned. I'm not the issues of the political issues of immigration. That doesn't really excite me too much. My question is, okay, people are here. The cities look different. London, and I'm living in Chicago now. It's a very diverse city as well. And okay, so what does the church do? How do we respond? And it's probably different than we did 50 years ago. And so we need to wrestle through that.
Cool. Well, I look forward to reading it when you get it finished.
Come back in a couple of years, but we're slowly but surely.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing from Chris. I know I have. Thanks so much for sharing, Chris. And if you want to be praying for the work in Shepherd's Bush, the name of the church, not that God needs to know the name of the church, but the church in Shepherd's Bush is called
New City Church. And you can find us at newcityipc.org or Twitter. You can follow me, London Hatch, or New City IPC on Twitter.
Cool. I'll put those details below.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much, Chris.
All right, man. Sounds good.